the Forgotten World. The grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly floated in the void between stars, a massive station built from crystallized light and quantum-locked metal. Inside, representatives from 47 civilizations gathered around a circular platform that stretched nearly a kilometer wide. Holographic displays flickered above each delegation, showing star maps, trade routes, and military deployments across 1,000 systems. Ambassador Theron Kex of the Sarkathi Empire adjusted his ceremonial scales as he prepared to speak. His species had evolved from reptilian predators on a world of endless deserts, and even after 10,000 years of civilization, his golden eyes still carried the sharpness of a hunter. He was old by any standard, having served in the Assembly for 300 years, and in all that time one puzzle had never been solved: the empty seat reserved for Earth. Theron rose from his position, his tall frame casting shadows across the polished floor. His voice carried the weight of centuries when he spoke, amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems to reach every corner of the vast hall. Esteemed colleagues, we gather once more to address matters of galactic security and cooperation. Before we proceed, I must raise the question that has haunted this assembly for 180 years. What do we do about the humans? A wave of murmurs rolled through the chamber. The Quillari delegation, beings of pure energy contained in crystalline shells, pulsed with colors that indicated annoyance. The massive Gorath representatives, each standing 4 meters tall with stone-like skin, rumbled their disapproval. The delicate whisper folk, who communicated through scent and barely weighed more than a child, released clouds of confusion into their environmental bubbles. Chancellor Oryx of the Quillari Collective spoke first, his voice like chiming bells. Ambassador Kex, we have discussed this matter at 17 previous summits. The humans have made their position clear. They wish to remain isolated. Perhaps we should respect their choice and focus our attention on species who value our fellowship. Respect their choice? Theron's tail swept across the floor in a gesture of disagreement. The human homeworld sits at a strategic junction between 3 major trade corridors. Their system contains resources that could feed a dozen colonies. Their sun burns with perfect stability for another 4 billion years. And they sit there, silent and watching, while the galaxy moves around them. High Commander Vex of the Gorath Defense Legion slammed a massive fist against his console, creating a sound like thunder. Then let them sit. We have extended the hand of friendship 143 times. We have offered technology, protection, and membership in the most advanced civilization this galaxy has ever known. They send the same message every time. Thank you, but no. They are fools, and fools deserve whatever fate brings them. Theron knew Vex was not wrong. The first contact with Earth had occurred nearly 2 centuries ago, when a Quillari exploration vessel detected radio signals coming from the small blue world. The discovery had been celebrated. A new species, young but showing signs of technological advancement, perfect candidates for uplifting and integration into galactic society. The Sarkathi had been chosen to make first contact, given their experience with young civilizations. Theron himself had been part of that initial delegation, though he was much younger then. He remembered the excitement as they approached Earth, expecting the usual response of awe, fear, or overwhelming curiosity that most species displayed when they learned they were not alone in the universe. Instead, Earth's leaders had listened politely to everything the delegation offered. They had asked intelligent questions. They had shown neither fear nor hostility. And then, after 3 days of discussions, they had simply said no. No explanation. No demands. No anger. Just a polite refusal and a request that the galaxy leave them in peace. The assembly had been confused but not concerned. Young species often needed time to adjust to the reality of galactic civilization. They would send another delegation in 10 years. Surely by then the humans would have reconsidered. But 10 years later the answer was the same. And 10 years after that. And again for 180 years. During that time the assembly had watched Earth carefully. Long-range sensors showed a civilization that was developing but slowly. They had expanded throughout their solar system, building colonies on their moon and Mars, establishing mining operations in their asteroid belt. But they had no faster-than-light travel. No energy shields. No plasma weapons. By galactic standards, they were primitives playing with tools they barely understood. There is a more pressing matter, said Speaker Milera of the Whisper Folk, her translator converting her scent language into audible words. The Null Swarm has changed course. Our deep space monitors detected the shift 3 cycles ago. They are no longer heading toward the Vexor Nebula. They are moving toward the outer rim, toward unclaimed territory. The chamber fell silent. The Null Swarm was not a civilization. It was a catastrophe given form. No one knew where they came from or what drove them. They appeared every few centuries, massive fleets of biomechanical ships that consumed everything in their path. Planets were stripped of resources. Populations were harvested for organic material. Nothing was left behind except dead worlds and silence. The last time the Null Swarm had emerged 70,000 years ago, it had taken the combined might of 12 major civilizations to drive them back into the deep void. 400 billion lives had been lost. Entire species had been erased from existence. Theron felt his blood run cold. What is their trajectory? Milara's crystalline chamber filled with the brown and gray sense of grim certainty. Current projections show they will reach human space in approximately 6 local months. If they maintain their current speed and the humans have not developed defensive capabilities we are unaware of, Earth will be consumed within days of the swarm's arrival. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted across the floor, some calling for immediate military intervention, others arguing that humanity had chosen their fate by refusing protection. The Gorath delegation demanded that ships be sent immediately to evacuate any humans who wished to leave. The Quillari insisted that the prime directive of non-interference applied, even in circumstances of extinction. Theron raised his hand for silence and eventually the chamber quieted. We must make one final attempt at contact. Send a message to Earth. Tell them what is coming. Offer them asylum, offer them protection, offer them whatever they need. We cannot simply stand by and watch an entire species be erased. Chancellor Oryx nodded slowly. Agreed. I will personally compose the message. Though I suspect we already know what their answer will be. The message was sent that same day, transmitted across light years through quantum-entangled communication arrays. It was the most urgent message the Assembly had ever sent to Earth, detailing the Null Swarm threat, the timeline of their arrival, and offering unlimited resources for evacuation or defense. 3 days later, Earth's response arrived. Theron read it alone in his private quarters aboard the Assembly station. The message was brief, written in the same polite tone that humanity had used for nearly 2 centuries. The people of Earth thanked the Galactic Assembly for their concern and their generous offer of assistance. We acknowledge the threat of the Null Swarm and appreciate the warning. However, Earth must respectfully decline all offers of intervention or evacuation. We will handle this matter ourselves. We wish the Assembly continued prosperity and peace. Theron crushed the data tablet in his hand, his frustration finally breaking through centuries of diplomatic composure. Fools, he hissed. Stubborn, arrogant fools. But deep in his heart, beneath the anger and frustration, Theron felt something else. A small, nagging doubt that had grown over 180 years of watching humanity. The humans were not stupid. Every analysis of their communications, their technology, and their behavior showed a species of remarkable intelligence and adaptability. They had gone from primitive radio to fusion drives in less than 300 years. They had solved mathematical problems that had stumped Quillari researchers for millennia. They had created art and music and literature that rivaled anything in the galactic archives. So why would such an intelligent species refuse help when extinction was approaching? Theron walked to his viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness, Earth continued its silent vigil. And somewhere beyond that, the Null Swarm was coming. What are they hiding? Theron wondered. What have they been doing all this time? He would not have to wait long for an answer. Far from the Assembly, far from the trade routes and civilized systems, in the frozen darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, something was stirring. In the Oort cloud, that vast sphere of ice and ancient debris that marked the edge of Earth's solar system, lights were beginning to appear. One by one, like stars being born, energy signatures bloomed in the darkness. Massive structures that had slept in the cold for decades were awakening. Engines that no alien had ever seen began to hum with power. Weapon systems designed in absolute secrecy ran through their final checks. And in a command center carved into an asteroid the size of a small moon, Admiral Marcus Rivera stood before a wall of tactical displays and allowed himself a thin smile. He was a man who had given his entire life to a secret. His father had worked on the project before him. His grandfather had laid the first foundations. 3 generations of sacrifice, all leading to this moment. Admiral, said his second-in-command, Commander Sarah Chin. All fleet elements report ready. 2,000 ships, fully crewed and armed. We're ready to engage. Rivera nodded slowly. For 180 years, humanity had played the role of the ignorant child, content to be overlooked and underestimated. They had listened to every communication from the Assembly. They had studied every piece of technology that passed through their space. They had learned, adapted, and improved. And they had built. Send the activation codes, Rivera said quietly. It's time the galaxy learned what humanity has been doing while they weren't watching. The revelation. The null swarm emerged from the darkness between stars like a plague-given physical form. 670 biomechanical ships, each one a nightmare of twisted metal and living tissue fused together in ways that defied natural law. They were not built. They were grown, harvested from the corpses of dead civilizations and animated by something that existed between life and death. The largest of these vessels stretched 20 kilometers from end to end, its surface covered in pulsing organic matter that glowed with a sickly green light. Smaller ships surrounded it like parasites feeding on a dying host, each one capable of reducing a city to ash in minutes. They had crossed the galaxy in silence, moving through the void with terrible purpose. Their sensors had detected Earth months ago, a world rich with organic life and mineral resources, defended by nothing more than a few satellites and civilian spacecraft. An easy target. A quick harvest. The swarm did not know mercy. It did not understand negotiation. It knew only hunger, and Earth would feed that hunger well. Aboard the Galactic Assembly Monitoring Station positioned 3 light-years from Earth, Ambassador Theron Kex watched the sensor readings with growing horror. The null swarm had arrived exactly on schedule, and they were heading straight for the human homeworld. How long until they reach Earth? He asked, his voice tight with tension. The station's tactical officer, a young Quillari named Prism, flickered with colors of deep concern. At their current velocity, they will enter the inner solar system in approximately 8 hours. Earth's orbital defense grid will be within range in 12 hours. Theron had seen recordings of what the null swarm did to planets. The images still haunted his dreams. Cities melted into slag. Oceans boiled away. Entire continents stripped down to bedrock as the swarm harvested every molecule of useful matter. And when they were finished, they would move on, leaving behind a dead rock floating in space. Have we received any response from Earth? Any request for assistance? Prism dimmed sadly. No, Ambassador. Their last transmission was sent 6 hours ago. It was a simple message to all human colonies throughout their solar system. It said stay calm. Stay safe. Trust the plan. Trust the plan? High Commander Vex, who had insisted on being present for humanity's final hours, snorted with derision. What plan could they possibly have? They have no fleet. No planetary shields. No weapons capable of damaging swarm vessels. They are sheep waiting for the slaughter. Theron wanted to argue, but the facts supported Vex's assessment. The Assembly's best intelligence showed Earth's military capabilities were limited to conventional rockets and basic laser systems. Against the null swarm, such weapons were less than useless. It would be like throwing stones at a hurricane. Should we send our rapid response fleet? Asked Chancellor Oryx, who had joined them via holographic projection. We could reach Earth in 14 hours if we push our engines to maximum. Vex shook his massive head. By the time we arrive, it will be over. The swarm will have already begun the harvest. Our response fleet consists of 40 ships. Against 670 swarm vessels, we would accomplish nothing except adding our own dead to the count. The cruel mathematics of warfare were undeniable. The Assembly could mount a defense, but it would take weeks to gather sufficient forces. Earth did not have weeks. Earth had hours. Theron felt an old rage building in his chest. 180 years of stubborn isolation, and for what? To die alone? To prove some meaningless point about independence? He had tried to save them. The entire Assembly had tried. And humanity had refused every offer, every lifeline, every chance at survival. I want full sensor coverage of the battle, Theron said quietly. Record everything. When this is over, I want detailed analysis of how quickly the swarm consumes a planet. The data may help us prepare defenses for other worlds. It was a cold comfort, but it was all he could offer now. The null swarm crossed Neptune's orbit without slowing. The massive ice giant was irrelevant to their purpose. They passed Uranus with equal disinterest. Their target was the third planet from the Sun, and nothing would deter them from their harvest. As the swarm approached Saturn, their sensor arrays began detecting something unusual. Energy signatures were appearing throughout the outer solar system, concentrated heavily in the region beyond Neptune. The signals were faint but growing stronger by the minute, as if something massive was powering up after a long sleep. The swarm's collective intelligence processed this information and dismissed it as irrelevant. Young species often had mining operations in their outer systems. Whatever equipment the humans had placed there would be harvested along with everything else. They continued forward, and the energy signatures continued to grow. Admiral Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiant, flagship of humanity's hidden armada. Around him, tactical displays showed the positions of all 2,000 ships under his command, spread across a three-dimensional battlefield that encompassed billions of cubic kilometers. He was a man of 63 years, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many simulations of Earth's destruction. For 40 years he had trained for this moment, running countless battle scenarios, studying every recorded encounter with the Null Swarm, preparing for the day when humanity's great secret would finally be revealed. "All ships report ready status, Admiral," Commander Chin said from her station. "Weapons charged, shields at maximum, engines hot. We have full tactical coordination across all battle groups." Rivera nodded, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the swarm's approach vector. They were massive, terrifying, and they had destroyed civilizations far older than humanity. But they had never faced an enemy who had spent nearly 2 centuries preparing specifically to kill them. "How far are they from the engagement zone?" "Crossing Saturn's orbit now, sir. They'll reach the designated coordinates in 90 minutes. Rivera touched a control on his command chair, opening a channel to the entire fleet. 2,000 ships, 50 million men and women who had lived their entire lives in secret, training for a war the galaxy thought impossible. "This is Admiral Rivera to all vessels. In 90 minutes we will engage the Null Swarm. The galaxy believes we are helpless. They believe we are primitives who will be swept aside in hours. They have spent 2 centuries underestimating humanity, and that ends today." He paused, letting his words sink in across the fleet. "Our grandparents built the first ships in secret. Our parents refined the weapons and shields. We have inherited their work and their sacrifice. Every system we use, every weapon we fire, every strategy we employ exists because 3 generations of humans refused to be victims. We learned from the galaxy's technology and made it better. We studied the swarm's tactics and found their weaknesses. We prepared for this battle while the entire universe assumed we were too primitive to matter." Rivera stood, his voice growing harder. "In 90 minutes, the Null Swarm will learn what it means to attack humanity. In 90 minutes, the galaxy will learn that Earth does not need their protection. All ships, proceed to attack positions. Make our ancestors proud." The response that came back was not cheers or battle cries. It was something more powerful. 2,000 ships acknowledged his orders with perfect discipline, moving into formation with precision that would have impressed any military force in the galaxy. They had trained for this. They were ready. The Null Swarm detected the human fleet when they were still 50 million kilometers apart. Suddenly, space was filled with energy signatures, thousands of them, far more than their initial scans had suggested. The swarm's collective intelligence recalculated threat assessments and concluded that the humans had more ships than expected. It did not matter. Numbers alone would not save them. The swarm began forming attack patterns, spreading their vessels in a formation designed to overwhelm and consume. They had used this strategy against 100 worlds. It had never failed. Then the human fleet opened fire and everything changed. The first weapons to strike were long-range particle beams, improved versions of Quillari technology that humanity had studied for decades. But where Quillari beams would have scorched the swarm's organic armor, human beams cut through it like paper. The weapons had been specifically calibrated to disrupt the biomechanical connection that held swarm ships together. 3 swarm vessels exploded in the first volley, their organic components separating from their mechanical cores in spectacular fashion. The swarm reacted with confusion. Their armor should have held. Young species did not have weapons this powerful. The second wave of attacks came from humanity's missile systems. Thousands of warheads streaked across the void, each one containing a payload designed by Earth's best xenobiologists. The missiles struck swarm vessels and released engineered viruses that attacked their organic tissue, causing it to necrotize and fail within seconds. 17 more ships died, their living components rotting away while their mechanical parts drifted uselessly. Aboard the monitoring station, Ambassador Theron Kex stared at his sensors in absolute disbelief. "What is happening? Where did those ships come from?" Prism was cycling through every color in the spectrum, indicating complete shock. "I don't know, Ambassador. Our sensors are detecting 2,000 human vessels, all of them armed with technology that matches or exceeds assembly standards. They're engaging the swarm with coordinated precision. The swarm has already lost 20 ships. 20 ships." Vex leaned forward, his stone-like face showing the first crack of surprise in centuries. "That's impossible. Humans don't have a fleet. We've been monitoring their system for 200 years. Apparently," Theron said slowly, "we weren't monitoring carefully enough. The battle intensified. The Null Swarm, recovering from their initial surprise, launched their own counterattack. Millions of smaller attack drones poured from the larger vessels, living weapons designed to swarm enemy ships and tear them apart with biological claws and acidic secretions. The human fleet responded with point defense systems that tracked and destroyed thousands of drones per second. Ships that did get hit had shields that held against attacks that should have shredded them. And when shields failed, human armor proved surprisingly resilient. Admiral Rivera watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. Every prediction, every simulation had been accurate. The swarm was powerful, but they were predictable. They had not evolved their tactics in 70,000 years because they had never needed to. Humanity had spent 2 centuries doing nothing but evolving. Battle Group Theta, execute flanking maneuver 7. Battle Group Sigma, concentrate fire on their command vessel. All other groups, maintain formation and continue suppression fire. The human fleet moved like a single organism, ships coordinating with millisecond precision. They had trained together in the darkness of the Oort cloud, running simulations against swarm tactics pulled from ancient assembly archives. Every captain knew their role. Every crew knew their task. The swarm's command vessel, the massive 20-kilometer behemoth at the center of their formation, suddenly found itself under concentrated attack from 300 human warships. Beams cut into its hull from a dozen angles. Missiles penetrated deep into its core. Specially designed electromagnetic pulses disrupted the connection between its organic and mechanical components. The great ship shuddered and began to break apart. Without their central command node, the swarm's coordination faltered. Individual ships began making their own tactical decisions, and that was a fatal mistake against an enemy as disciplined as humanity. The battle lasted 7 hours. When it ended, 670 Null Swarm vessels had been reduced to debris and biological matter floating in the void. They had managed to destroy 11 human ships, a loss rate that any military strategist would consider a miracle. Admiral Rivera stood on his bridge, watching the last swarm vessel explode on his display. Around him, his crew sat in stunned silence, unable to quite believe that they had won. Casualty report, Rivera said quietly. Commander Chin checked her displays. 11 ships lost, approximately 14,000 casualties. Compared to swarm forces, complete annihilation of enemy fleet. Sir, we won. We actually won. Rivera nodded slowly, then opened a channel that he knew was being monitored by every major civilization in the galaxy. This is Admiral Marcus Rivera of the United Earth Naval Service. To the Galactic Assembly, we apologize for our long silence. We have been occupied with preparations. The threat to our system has been neutralized. Earth is secure. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. For 180 years, humanity watched and learned. We saw how the galaxy operates. We saw the dangers that exist in the darkness. We saw that safety comes not from alliances alone, but from strength. So we built that strength in secret where no one thought to look. Rivera's voice grew harder. Earth will now accept the Assembly's invitation to join galactic civilization. But we will not join as supplicants seeking protection. We will join as equals with the strength to defend not only ourselves but others who face similar threats. The age of humanity's silence is over. We hope the galaxy is ready for what comes next. The transmission ended. Aboard the monitoring station, Theron Kex sat in silence for a long moment. Then slowly he began to laugh. It was not a happy laugh, but rather the sound of someone who had just realized they had been played for a fool for 2 centuries. They were never hiding, he said quietly. They were preparing. All this time, every refusal, every polite decline, they were buying time to build the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Vex rumbled with what might have been respect. 2,000 ships. Hidden in their outer system where our sensors never thought to look carefully. And weapons designed specifically to counter every major threat. The humans are either the most paranoid species in existence or the most brilliant. Perhaps, Chancellor Oryx's hologram said, they are both. Theron stood, his tail sweeping in a gesture of acknowledgement. I need to prepare for the next summit. Something tells me the human representative will actually attend this time, and we have 180 years of underestimation to answer for. As he left the monitoring station, Theron found himself wondering what other secrets humanity had hidden in their silent centuries. If they could build a fleet of 2,000 warships without anyone noticing, what else might they be capable of? The galaxy, he realized, was about to find out. And somewhere in the darkness of the Oort cloud, Admiral Rivera allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before issuing his next orders. The battle was won, but the real work was just beginning. Earth had announced itself to the galaxy, and now they would have to prove that their strength was matched by wisdom. The age of humanity's silence had ended. The age of humanity's voice was about to begin.